Welcome to podcast number 218. Do you know how to develop remarkable relationships with vendors? Stay with us.
This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome, everybody. Tonight we have a really nice podcast episode. We had a person reach out and ask the following questions. How do you develop better relationships with vendors? And how can that be reciprocated? How can vendors do a really good job of taking care of the contractor or trade partners or whoever's on the site? And so it was interesting that they asked me that because my dad was and he's on there. His name is Ken Schroeder. Say hi.
Hi.
So he's on here with me from California. He lives in California, and he was the A driver and then truck boss for a company called Service Rock Products before they were bought out by Robertson's. And his role with the salesman at the company was to provide remarkable service. So it was interesting that I got asked this question. Actually, the question wasn't just how do you develop good relationships with vendors? It was how do you develop really good relationships with vendors and specifically ready-mix suppliers. And so I've got the most qualified person in the United States here on the phone with me tonight, and we're ready to have a good podcast. So just to get everyone used to you, Dad, what introduction would you give about yourself? Like a little summary or maybe your work experience? Like, let's get people familiar with you a bit here.
Well, I helped the company do training videos, and I helped them with getting the quality control on our product all dialed in to where we knew exactly what we were selling. And also, I was instrumental in getting all the drivers and all the personnel on board to where they could put out a product.
And it's really service, right? Like the product is what they, but yeah, go ahead.
Service. They, our drivers were out there to service the customer. And we were on time. Our product was quality, and it actually got to where we had inspectors trying to sell our company to guys that were doing the concrete because they knew that we were going to have everything the way it should be.
And then, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, the thing is that you've got to have a quality product. And in order to do that, we had a lab that did test cylinders on all of our products that we were sending out. And they would do the brakes on them. They would test them in 7 days or 21 days. Our brakes always came up in 7 days, which means it was above what the customer needed as far as strength. So, and then I helped put everything together to where we had the plant where we had hot water, we had refrigerated water if we needed it in different types of loads. And our mechanics kept the trucks serviced once a month where we didn't have to worry about breakdowns. And our trucks and everything was nice and clean and just put up a good front for these customers. When we pull on the job, they look at us and say, wow.
Yeah.
And then once they talk to the inspectors, they knew that we were putting out quality product.
And I remember it was when I started working with Hensel Phelps out of the prisons, I was able to work on 2 project sites. So one was the United States Penitentiary, and then the other one was the Federal Correctional Institute. And on the first one, I was a finisher on both. So this is kind of an interesting little dynamic here. So my dad and the salesman got me the job with Hensel Phelps. My dad and the salesman, thank goodness, because that changed the rest of my life, obviously. And when I went out to the penitentiary as a finisher, I remember getting bad service from a different ready-mix supplier at the U.S. Penitentiary. But when I went to the FCI2 project, that was serviced by Service Rock Products, the company that my dad worked for that he's talking about, and they were on time, and they had good mud and good brakes and the whole nine. And what was interesting, as he's talking about this, I have firsthand experience with it, because when we got bad service at the other prison, the United States Penitentiary, and they showed up late, sometimes it would be an hour and a half, and then we're out there finishing concrete in the afternoon, and inside these, I tell people, and they still don't believe me sometimes, but when the tilt panels go up and there's no breeze, and the color is white, it's a light gray, but the sun is just shining down and it's baking in there and there's no breeze. They measured the temperature at 138 degrees in there. And so it makes a big difference, right? And then I do remember specifically on that project, the general superintendent telling me that the brakes weren't coming up. So they had to wait for the 14 and 28 day breaks, and that never happened at FCI2. And so I think it's really interesting. So my dad and you on the podcast, talk to you directly, you have experience providing service, but also knowing what it takes for contractors to really give that back. So I'm going to give you a couple of questions here in just a little bit, but I usually open with a couple of things. So I'm going to do that right now, and I'm going to ask you the question, Dad, in a minute, what you're excited about in life. So think about that. I'll give you like 30 seconds. In about 30 seconds, I'll ask you that. But I wanted to continue a little trend. There were little sections in the book, Elevating Construction Superintendents, that didn't make its way into the final copy, and so I'm making sure to cover those every podcast that I send out. This would have been Principle 15. It's called Lemon Sense, and I chose it because I was on here with my dad, because one of the things you might not know, actually you don't know, so I'll tell you, is that Service Rock Products, not only did they have good brakes and good mud, and would actually add the more cement to the ratio in the concrete mix, to do that at their own expense. Not only did they have a testing lab, not only did they have salesmen, not only did they have QC specialists, not only did they have a truck boss providing service, but their plant was remarkably clean, and all of the trucks were remarkably clean. And they were, I just remember seeing them. They look better than a brand new vehicle running down the road. They're beautiful. A lot of times you see the back end of a concrete truck and it's all nasty, but that wasn't the case. And how they did one thing in the office or the batch plant or everywhere was the same concept everywhere. It was clean, organized, and it was safe. And the drivers had grading systems. And Dad, were always an A driver, except for I think one time there was a time where the truck had a little accident. You had to go to a B plus or something like that. But you were always an A driver, and I remember that, and that sense of excellence stood with me. So this little segment I'm about to read, and then I'll get to what are you excited about in life. I'll read it to everybody. It's called Lemon Sense. So the master builder needs to be aware of the psychological triggers in construction. The following story comes from the book Scaling Up Excellence by Huggy Rayo and Robert I. Sutton, in which they describe an experiment that was commissioned to infuse lemon-scented cleaning products into one of the passenger railway cars, and then to observe the difference in passengers' behavior in the amount of litter they left behind in the scented cars versus the ones without scents. 3 times more trash was left by passengers in the cars that did not contain the lemon scent. At a subconscious level, people who were triggered by the lemon scent of the cleaning solution cared for and kept their environment cleaner. These same kinds of subconscious triggers also happen in construction. When projects have clean entryways, a nicely formed fence, or have a high energy environment, it triggers the worker to a level of care that is expected on that site. Conversely, if the entryway of that project is dirty, then that trigger allows the workers to treat the rest of the site that way. If your people are working near another entity and the other workers have low energy, it will be a problematic mental trigger for your workers. The first area a worker sees on the project site can affect his or her attitude, energy, and work habits. The office, the lunchroom, the bathrooms, the parking lot, and the entryway should all trigger their subconscious to a higher level of existence and care, because how we do one thing is how we do everything. And so that was a little chapter section that I wrote that didn't end up in the book. So I read these sections every night. And so I like to share those little snippets until I'm done with my those little sections. So I've got a question for you, Dad. What are you excited about in life right now?
Life, I'm excited about interacting with people and helping people and just doing everything to the best of my ability.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it really is about people. You know, that ties into your subject about service. Um,
I would go out on a job and look at me and say, "You think you can get in here?" And I said, "Just tell me I can't. I'll do it." And so I love a challenge, and it's helped throughout my career.
Well, as you go, don't be afraid to brag on yourself a little bit. I love the stories where you get out of your truck and you see somebody struggling and you go out there and you grab a shovel or you grab the rod and you help them out. So I love that. And I'll share what I'm excited about. Today I went through a full day training with Felipe Engineer, a lean expert for Scrum training. Oh, no problem. That kind of stuff
I'm on
happens all
the
the
phone
time.
with Jason, so I'll talk to you tomorrow. Okay, bye-bye.
What I'm excited about is I did a Scrum training today with Felipe Engineer. He's a lean expert, and the training was 10 times more better than what I thought it was. And so we'll have some podcasts next week on a Scrum series. I think everyone on the podcast is really going to enjoy it, and so I'm really looking forward to that. So next week's going to have some really good content, really great topics, and I hope everyone's looking forward to it. So, Dad, I'm going to put you on the spot. Let's start first with, how can a company develop a better relationship with the vendors, and then we're going to talk about what you did as truck boss and as a truck driver, and what Service Rock Products did to take care of the general contractors. So this is a time for you to be a little bit selfish, not selfish, but like ask, hey, if there's a vendor and they could supply lumber, they could supply masonry blocks, they could supply ready mix like you did. What were some of the best in class things that you saw general contractors or customers do to develop a relationship with you?
Well, for one thing, being hands-on. When we showed up on the job, if they'd come out there and say, "Okay, here's what we have," explain everything to us, make sure the job site is secure, nothing in there that might hurt our equipment or anything else. And they showed an interest in us. We weren't just somebody that came up there and going to deliver something and that's it. It was more of a hands-on. We were friends with the people that we were working for. I remember Kerry out there on Hensel Phelps. You know, he come in there and he'd say, "Okay, here's what we need. Here's how many yards per hour we need and everything else." I would go back to the plant and say, "Okay, here's what we got to do to maintain this." Like on one pour, we had 305 yards per hour consistently, because we had all the trucks, we had all the material, everything we needed. And the job went so well that they just loved it.
Yeah.
But my job in the whole deal was to make sure each one of these drivers got their slumps right, so there was no wet loads, and every one of them was ready to go when the boom pump or whatever we were pouring with was ready. So We had one job out there in Palmdale, and we had 2,700 yards pour. We started at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was 9 degrees. We had a system where we thaw the trucks out when they got on the job, and they had 3 boom pumps with 1 backup, and not one boom pump went without a truck. We were putting out 305 yards per hour on this job. And these guys, they're used to dealing with regular companies. So they going to start at 3 o'clock in the morning. They were going to have the top out crew come in at 9 o'clock. Well, at 6 o'clock, we were done. We were topped out. They were ready for their top out crew because of the fact that we had the service out there and everything went so smooth. And so they called them in early, but they were done with the job or not really done with it, but close to being done with it when their top out crew normally got out there to start finishing.
That's awesome. And it sounds like if I was going to summarize that point, it sounds like that personal relationship of explaining what you need. So it's not just, hey, I need 2,700 yards or I need 380 yards or 500 yards. This is what we're placing. This is how many pumps we have. We've got our crews coming in at this time and this time. This is the kind of service, the spacing. I mean, typically you have to order that anyway, but that personal touch help the information to get to you. And then if you have a good service provider, a good vendor, then you communicated that to all the drivers. And that's actually, Dad, something that we talk about a lot on the podcast is total participation. You know, if in other circumstances, if the vendor is out there and the drivers are out there and they're just showing up to a random job and they don't know the context of what's going on, they don't know why we have to have the speed, they don't know, on a big map pour, that if there's a cold joint, then that's a huge structural problem. If they don't know those things, then they can't provide the service. Sounds like that's what you did, is you brought the communication all the way from the customer, what do they want, to every individual service provider. Do I have that right?
Oh, yes. But we exceeded every expectation they had. We had 90 trucks on that job and 2 plants batching out so that we could maintain that 305 yards an hour. And we even had the plant manager out there helping the drivers when they got loaded, making sure the humps were right and everything else before they left, because I was out on the job coordinating trucks there. And it went so smooth that that the inspectors were using that as an example when we went to other jobs.
Well, I love that because, in my experience, and I don't want to intend to badmouth anybody, but I've been on a couple of projects out here in Arizona, actually run those projects, and it's, when you order concrete, it's like you're getting checked out at Home Depot. Nobody cares. It's your problem. It's almost like a self-checkout type of thing. The trucks show up whenever, and if you call the plant, it's like, oh, well, they should be there. Well, what do you mean they should be there? Do you not have radio contact? Do you not care? Did you not follow up? And I love it when a concrete company owns it and, like you said, has a representative out there to make sure that the quality's going well and that everything's working in order. Because as a general contractor, the supers and the field engineers typically have to check the tickets, the batch number, the slump, the temperature, the time on the trucks. And I remember
Revolutions.
And Revolutions, the whole nine. And I remember at Service Rock Products, when we were at FCI2, it was almost like the truck boss was there, the salesman was there, sometimes the PM was out there, and they're like, we got it. And we're, oh, okay. And why shouldn't a company that's delivering that check their own mix design? Why shouldn't they check their own temperature? Why shouldn't they check their own time? And I think that's a really good point. Hey, it looks like you had something to say. Sorry.
No, it's just I was going to bring up the fact when you were on the women's prison and Robertson was supplying the concrete.
Yeah.
And one of the drivers stopped and ate breakfast on the way out there.
Yeah.
So when he got out there, he was behind 6 or 7 different trucks. So he waited instead of jumping in where he should have been. And so I remember you telling me that here you were out in the middle of all this wet mud and one load out there was setting up. and
Yeah.
you were out there, had to finish that. And so service is 90% of the quality.
Ooh, we've never talked about that on this podcast. Is that the service is 90% of the quality? Because a lot of times when we talk about quality, we think materials and the interface and how things go through. But if you're right, if you have a contractor or a subcontractor, I call them trade partners, even if they're doing flooring or they're doing concrete or they're setting floors, the service, the attention to care, the attention to detail is what makes the difference. I like that. That's awesome. So let me ask you a question. That's something. Go ahead. You had something to say.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that that's a really neat example. So it sounds like, and Kerry Williams is doing well, by the way. I'm going to forward him this podcast, lots of good memories there. But so he had that personal relationship, and you with Service Rock Products had that relationship back. What were some of the best things? Oh, one thing I wanted to remember. I do remember when you let me when I was I wasn't a kid at the time. I think I just visited you at the batch plant one time, and I saw a site map of the FCI2 project in front of the dispatcher's desk, and he would point to what building the drivers were going to go to when they were loading and came up to get their tickets at the batch plant. And I thought, wow, how impressive is that? That's good communication. They need to know exactly where they're going. How many times does a driver show up on the job site and they're just running around not knowing where to go? That never, well, I don't know if it never happened, but it didn't happen there. So that was a really good example. But here, I'd like you to come up with one or two or three thoughts of what have you seen, and it could have been with Conco Construction, it could have been with Cambridge Construction, it could have been with Hensel Phelps, it could have been with any of these folks, of a general contractor or a concrete contractor really going out of the way to develop a good relationship with you. Do you have any hot spots or like really good examples or things that you saw that you liked that they did?
When I first took over the job as truck boss, I went out to Conco's job out there, and Richard Cambridge at the time was running the chute. He says, "It's about time we got you in a spot where you could do some good." And that really made me feel good. You know, the fact that I made sure all these drivers were good, everything was taken care of and everything before they started unloading. And it was a lot easier on him because he'd get done pouring a truck. Here's another one ready to go, you know. And what we did on like Hensel Phelps and whatever, the salesman and myself, we would go out to the job, find the route into the job, and we would direct the trucks as they got out there. So they knew, and there was nothing in there that was going to hurt their trucks or equipment or get them stuck or anything else. So we had all of that taken care of, and it made a difference.
That's awesome.
Because these guys, they come right in, they go, boom, they lined up, and another salesman would be right there saying, "Okay, here's what we need."
Yeah. Well, who was your favorite company to work for when you were a driver? Like, of all the general contractors or concrete companies, who was your favorite?
Well,
like one or two?
Well, I love Conco,
Okay. Why?
but I love, there's 2 or 3 different plants, and when you have rapport with the foremans and the guys that get out there and actually run the chute and everything else, you got to where you knew almost what they were going to do before they did.
Okay.
And it really helped. Everything went so smooth. I've been on a job one time when I had to get around this building, and I had to have a guy on each corner of my truck looking at eaves, looking at form lumber, looking at everything else. But they got me in there, and we saved them $250 on a pump at that time. That was a lot.
Yeah. that's probably at least $700 now.
Oh, it was.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that the personal relationship, the rapport, is what made the difference for you with some of your customers. That when it became more of a family or a friendship type of a and experience instead of just a cold customer vendor relationship. That's when you were able to really partner together for some cool things.
And with our company, whenever we had to have calcium chloride to make it set up, it was real cold out. We always had hot water so that the concrete would react to the calcium chloride. And then in the wintertime, we had a big refrigeration unit that kept cold water in there.
Oh, you mean in the summer? Yeah.
And remember when we took that load up to Kennedy Meadows?
Oh,
It
yeah.
took us 3.5 hours to get up there.
Yeah.
And we used that Delbo, which the cement molecules and keeps them from activating. So
Wow.
you just barely turn your drum all the way out there.
Yeah.
When you get out there, you mix it up for 90 revolutions and you got brand new mud.
Yeah.
And you finished it, so you know.
No, it worked out well. And it was funny when you talk about that relationship and that kind of that personal touch. I remember Service Rock having company picnics where you would invite customers. I remember you showing contractors how to go do the testing, do the slump tests, and to prepare cylinders and do things like that. So that's something that I'm definitely going to highlight and mention to the person who asked me this question, was that intimate relationship. Why can't we go over and talk to the drivers? Why couldn't we one time have the concrete supplier out there on an $80 million job one time come out there, maybe even host a little barbecue and have some of their drivers come that way? Why couldn't we, just some of these questions, why not, if we ask some of these questions, it would lead us to more connected relationships, even though we're all busy, because like you said, that care, that service really transfers into quality. So let me ask you a question, Dad. Why? I know that Service Rock Products has the right name, right? So even in the name that leads it there. But why did that company have such a good mindset? When it was bought out, you didn't choose to stay because you knew that it wouldn't stay the same. So what were some of the things they did as a vendor, as a supplier, to create that culture of excellence?
Well, the one thing, the plant manager and everybody were more hands-on with all the drivers, employees, mechanics, whoever. You could always go in there and talk to the big man anytime you wanted to, and he'd welcome. And what they did was they, oh God, I lost my train of thought.
Oh, you're fine. That happens to me all the time. And
But they
go ahead.
they
Sorry.
took, and we had safety meetings once a month.
Okay.
Once a month, we went over all of the things that that affects the drivers during the rest of the month. And we went through safety, we went through quality control, and all the drivers knew exactly what they were hauling and why. So it really made a difference. These guys could get out there and they got used to customers too. And like Hensel Phelps, you got so much water to go in a yard of concrete to get a certain slump. Okay. They started pouring a little bit wetter out at Hensel Phelps because of the fact that the brakes kept coming up in 7 days.
Okay.
They could pour, and it made it easier on the customer to finish it, to work it, and everything else. And the only reason you could do that was because our quality of product. And it really made a difference with some of those guys. Carrie was telling me that those guys out there just love to see us on the job.
Yeah. Well, frankly, being at the penitentiary was a nightmare. That would always blow up on. You remember, I worked with a guy named Virgil, and he would never get stressed, and I'm over there stressed. Yeah, and I don't know if you remember this, Dad, but you made me you do remember it. You made me a little buggy, a dolly, and you strapped on,
truck.
yeah, a little hand truck, and you strapped on little milk crates to it. And I had all my finishing tools in there. And I remember some of the union finishers, they'd be like, "Hey, kid, move your RV or move your rig out of my way." But there was this old war veteran, great guy, Virgil, and he was just troweling away. and the mud's going off on us, and there's no way we're going to pick that back up. They're going to have to patch it. And he would just, I remember him saying, lucky, lucky, lucky. Like, he just kept doing that. And Trell and I'm freaking out over there. You know, we had to, on the Penitentiary, we had to have little cups of patching material ready, mixed up with our margin trowels as we were finishing the concrete, because it was such a habit for us to finish it behind schedule. So we literally had some I don't even remember the mixture that Carrie gave us, but a cement mixture patching material right there in a little jar. We hung it on our belts to the left so that we could patch. Literally, that's how bad it was going off on us at the Penitentiary as we went. And then when we switched over at FCI2, that didn't happen. So really good information. And let me ask you a question and put you on the spot. Did the grading of drivers help or hurt, do you think? Because all those drivers were graded.
Everybody at first resented it.
Okay.
But then they got to where they got more competitive. Okay, I'm going to outdo this guy so I can be a little higher on my evaluation. And the evaluations, you got scored on that. So whether you were A, B, or C, or D driver, it was all in your own merits. And we had the salesman, the
was it the
batchman,
dispatcher? Yeah. Okay.
batchman, and the truck boss. We all sat down and graded each driver. And I would be out on the job finding out, okay, how's this driver treating? And they'd say, well, he's not ready, sits out there and whatever. And so we'd go right to him, get that rectified, because that's not what we're about. We're about being ready when they are. And we always showed up 15 minutes early on the jobs. So we were ready when they were ready to go to work.
Yeah.
Because, you got to put your chutes on, you got to get your slump just right and everything else. And so when they didn't have to wait on us, it made their job better.
Yeah. I like that. The reason I asked that question is because I once went to a lean training with the AGC, and they said grade contractors on site. And so when I was at the research lab in Tucson, and then subsequent jobs, numerous projects, anytime I started to grade the performance of every contractor on a construction project, it just rose and rose and rose. The performance just went through the roof. But 90% of the superintendents that I suggest that to absolutely hate the idea. In fact, I've been on a coaching call or consulting calls before and had people say, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. And it was the single biggest improvement to the project that I have ever experienced. Meaning, when I grade everyone, you're right, they do get a little bit competitive, and nobody wants to be a D or an F. And I think you told me that there were some F and D. No, I don't know if they had Fs, but D drivers.
No, D drivers.
D drivers that would make their way up to a C at least, because they didn't want that grade. And I would just, it blows me away. Literally, here's a magic pill. Like here's like, it's a bag of magic that'll fix your construction projects, grading all of your contractors. And 90% of the people I suggest it to absolutely hate the idea. Anyway,
the thing is that the batchman and everything else is paying attention to that quality of driver. And so if he has an A driver and a D driver, he's going to send that A driver out, and that D driver is going to wash up and go home. So it hurts him in his pocketbook, for one thing, besides being, how come you didn't send me out there? And they said, well, because we have to think about the customer.
Yeah, absolutely. So, absolutely. And you're respecting the driver by giving them a grade and challenging them to be better. So, yeah. So I'd like to do two more things really quickly. I'm eventually gonna. So there's a lot of my listeners, or not my listeners, but the listeners to the podcast, are in Utah and up north, and they have the front end Oh, I don't even know what
yeah.
the loaded ready mix
That's
trucks.
a whole different ball of wax because the driver's running the chute and everything else.
Well, I wanted to get your opinion on it, but first off, I want to say, um, I'm going to say something that I noticed about Service Rock that made them a great vendor, and then I'll ask you to say something, and then we'll go back and forth until we run out of ideas. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So one of the things that I always noticed, and I've said it before, but was how clean the batch plant was, like perfectly spotless clean. You go, your turn. What's something you noticed that made Service Rock a great provider?
Well, the drivers, they come up to get the ticket and they see a clean batch plant and everything else, and they have a tendency to clean up their cab of their truck or whatever it is, their work environment.
Yeah.
And it really made a difference because, you know, when you set an example, people tend to follow, even though if it's subconscious.
Yeah.
And we had drivers that were pretty messy. But then again, every month I did a truck evaluation and I'd go through the cabs, everything, and I'd write them up for it if they were substandard. And so that affected their evaluation. So
Yeah.
you had a lot of different checks and balances.
For that, that's awesome. Well, I'll go next. So one of the things that I noticed was Service Rock was, and especially the dispatch, and maybe he was nicer to me than he was you, but he was always looking out for customers. If there was a
Right.
if there was a short load, they'd be forgiving. If there was some hot mud that we used to call it, where there's extra mud coming back from a job that didn't need it, they'd let somebody know in case they had a home project. They were patient with variation in the orders. I remember that the batch man, or that's probably not what we should be saying, the dispatcher would always be looking at what can I do for the customer instead of how quickly can I get home. All right, back to you. What's
What they
you
did was if they had a little bit left over on the truck, instead of waiting to have them dump it and then come back and load him and waste time, they would load on top, and then they would tell the driver, tell the customer we've got a little bit of quarter of a yard of leftover mud on here, so he's going to have a little bit more, and it might start to set up a little bit quicker. So the customer knew about it, and so there was never any problem.
Yeah, because you can't do that on like a Hensel Phelps job, but you could on
No.
residential,
No.
right? And
We had at our plant, we had a place where you just run up, dump your mud, rinse it off real quick, and come back down and load. Now, I've had the batch man wait a couple trucks and then load me for a job because he knew I would get out there in a timely manner.
Yeah.
Because I just soon sit on the job than I would anywhere else.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of people that just didn't push. They just moseyed on out there. Well, that customer's waiting.
Yeah.
So,
Oh.
and that made me feel good.
I love that. And I'll do one here too. Your equipment was always maintained. Even the older trucks were maintained, even if they were about ready to get a new paint job. And I remember them, even the old ones, you'd strip them down, they'd sand them and paint them and make them look all pretty. And it brought to my mind, if the equipment's in good shape and looking sharp, then that's going to translate into the service. So that's one thing I noticed.
The customer relaxes because they see a good looking truck. Okay, it's not going to break down. It's well taken care of.
Yeah.
So it makes them feel better.
And it doesn't seem like a big deal until you get a company with a lot of equipment that breaks down. I remember in Tucson, we started out with a pump company, 2 or 3 pumps breaking down. Yeah, we were done. We switched them out so fast because that makes a big difference. People cannot come on the project site without good equipment. So give me 1 or 2 more observations of things that you all did at Service Rock that made the difference for you for service. Something that
Our
was
quality control in our lab, making sure the brakes come up in 7 days instead of 21 days or 14 days. But we did a job out in Palmdale, right there on 14, just off the 14, right on an earthquake fault. And every bit of mud we put into that job had to withstand the shock of an earthquake.
Okay.
and that's right on the fault line. So we had the they had another company that was going to supply the mud, and our inspectors talked them into going with us, and it paid off.
Yeah. And you know why the inspectors wanted to do that? Because when they get the bad tickets, when they get breaks that aren't coming up, they're the ones that have to answer to their superiors. It's a big, big deal.
And our lab was continually doing the breaks before they shipped it out because they wanted to know exactly what they were, they wanted to know if they're coming up to 5,000 pounds in 7 days or,
For that mix
So-
design, right? Yeah.
oh, yeah, that's a mixed design.
Yeah. Okay.
Words. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say, are you ready to answer the question? What is your preference, the front loaded ready mix trucks or the back, the ones that load out there? What do you call the difference between those? By the way, it's
The front loader is
Yeah.
cab open.
yeah, okay,
And okay, for one thing, like the plant I used to work with, the water was hard, a lot of mineral contents in it.
Okay.
So it was always splashing when you wash up your truck. It was always splashing all over your cab and windows and everything else. And it made it rough on the driver.
okay,
Now, the driver, if you got a driver that's got common sense and a little bit of fluidity in his actions, he can run that chute real nice, and he knows the customers what they love. But you get another one out there that all of a sudden he reaches over somewhere and hits that chute and knocks somebody over.
Yeah.
I don't like those trucks.
Yeah.
Now, when you get the rear loading truck, unloading trucks, the chute man has got a hold of it, and you're watching him for cues on whatever he wants to do, and it takes all the responsibility off of you and puts it on him.
Yeah. I remember when I was with Conco I was shoveling behind the screed when we were up there doing that big gosh, I can't remember how many yards we were replacing, but it was for a future tilt-up building for their new fab shop. And the drivers were out there running it, and they were just loading me. And finally, I was like, "Okay, I'm not shoveling this anymore. Unlock this chute for me. Like I'm running the chute. You just do what I say anyway." So it takes more manpower to do the back load, but man,
Only one.
what's that?
Actually, only one.
Yeah, I'm with
And
you.
he's working his hands and spreading it out a little bit, and it makes it easier on the guys that are dragging the rod board.
Yeah, I'm telling you that I remember being able to shovel like a madman, and I don't think I could do that anymore. But
Well, you were
well,
strong.
yeah, and used to it, and I was going to be the fastest one out there. So good memories. Let's
That's
close
the
the.
competitive nature.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I like in the personnel.
Yeah, I agree. And so we're going to close this podcast out, but I want to leave that anybody listening with a challenge. So, I'll give you like what would you want anybody listening to know? What would be your closing advice as we close out this subject?
Okay. Now, if you were pouring concrete, first thing you do is you check and find out how close plants are to you, because that truck has got 90 minutes from the time he's batched till you have to unload. So if you're too far away, you're going to have to figure something else out. And then I would go and inspect the plants, inspect the personnel, go up and talk to the batchman while he's working. And you kind of get a feel for what they've got. You look and see, okay, they've got a big hot water tank here, so they're not going to run out of hot water on the cold days. And they've got a big refrigeration unit so that they're not going to run out of cold water on the hot days. And we had two railroad cars side by side, one for refrigerated water, one for hot water. And it made it so much easier on us. And we had hot water in our washout tanks so that we didn't get froze up all the time. So
Yeah.
it's all about caring about your personnel and having, you go in there and you talk to the salesman, and he will explain just how well they can take care of you.
Yeah.
And that means a lot. because they know everything about it.
I agree. And something that I just thought of while you were talking, in World War II, when you had generals and lieutenant generals out there running the field combat in war, they would go personally inspect logistics. They would go personally inspect supply chains. They would go personally inspect materials. They would make sure that those things were taken care of because they knew their materials, their logistics, and all of the workings of the army meant victory. And same thing in a construction project. If we're placing 58,000 cubic yards of concrete or 36,000 cubic yards of concrete for this superstructure on this project, or even 12,000 cubic yards, why not go take that visit and make sure they can service the project? And the answer is do it. And so some of the things that I heard from you was, for a general contractor, let's just be specific to them. A general contractor can over communicate, can set clear expectations, can go visit and vet that vendor, that concrete company, that ready mix company, to make sure that they can provide that service. And they can make sure that the circumstances on a day-to-day basis are handled from a communication and setup standpoint to where everything's ready for the people putting in the work. And then what I heard from you from the vendor standpoint is that service equals quality. That service really is a mindset. That high expectations bring that service to pass. And the little things that you do, whether it's cleaning or the organization of the batch plan or that little extra touch, really goes a long way to create a culture of excellence. And so I've really appreciated you talking to me about this. And if there's anything else you want to say before we're done.
Yeah. When I first started as truck boss, now I had Palmdale plant over there was one of my plants. I had 9 plants that I serviced. But when I first went over there, everybody was kind of closed mouth, fighting me on everything and didn't want me to do anything to disrupt their deal. Well, when I went over there, the plant was kind of dirty and the trucks were kind of sloppy and everything. So anyway, the plant manager sat me down and he says, "What is your objective?" And I said, "My sole objective here is to make you look good."
Wow.
So by the time I got done, when they'd come in with leftover mud, I'd say, "Pour it over here," and I'd finish it for them if I had the time. And what we did was we made it where the drivers were all running on concrete over to the shop and to the fuel islands and everything. So their trucks were not getting dirty. It was easier on them. And I set up their stockpiles for all their materials where it's easy to get to. We had big cement blocks we poured with leftover mud. And it got so nice that they were bringing in customers to look at the plant before, that they were trying to sell their self to. And it really worked out good.
That's awesome. And that's a culture of continuous improvement and respecting people is what I heard, creating stability at those plants, and then always improving, like you said, placing concrete here, fixing this here, adjusting the stockpiles here. That's fantastic. And that kind of energy and attention to detail is obviously going to transfer not only to the customers but also to the workers, the drivers as well. So I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. So in closing, I hope that anybody listening to the podcast is better able to focus on that, because we always talk about relationships with the customers or the trade partners, but your vendors and your materials and your supply chains are so important as well. And so, Dad, we have a tradition as we close these podcasts out. I'll count to 3 and we say, "On we go." So for everybody listening, we love you. Thank you for staying with us. And then, Dad, 1, 2, 3, on we go.
On we go.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues. And help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.